The village of Ashwood lay cradled between rolling forests and winding rivers, a place where the sunlight danced on the leaves and the morning mist kissed the earth with a soft, silver glow. It was a village steeped in ritual and song, where generations had gathered to honor the twin forces of life and fire, believing that the flame carried the very heartbeat of the earth. Each year, the Festival of Flames illuminated the village with golden torchlight, a spectacle that drew every villager into a whirlwind of dancing, music, and sacred fire ceremonies. The festival was more than celebration. It was a promise to the ancestors, a pact that the land and its people would remain in harmony, that strength and renewal would flow through their lives as naturally as the river flowed beside them. Among the villagers, there was a young woman named Ayana, whose presence seemed to carry the same warmth and radiance as the festival itself. Her hair shimmered like spun copper in the sunlight, and her eyes, dark as the river at midnight, were full of depth and kindness. She moved through the village with the grace of someone intimately connected to the land, touching hands, offering smiles, and listening to the woes and joys of all she encountered. Villagers whispered that Ayana's courage was unmatched, that no one could face danger with a steadier heart. From helping fishermen untangle nets during floods to rescuing children trapped in the dense forest underbrush, Ayana had become a symbol of hope and reliability. Her laughter, clear and melodic, often carried across the riverbanks, drawing even the most somber villagers into momentary joy. Her parents, humble yet proud, often watched her from their small, sun-warmed cottage on the edge of the village. They had taught her the importance of balance, the necessity of courage tempered with wisdom, and the value of kindness as a form of strength. They had seen how the villagers had come to respect and love her, how elders sought her counsel as though she were the living embodiment of the village's hopes. Even children who had never met her felt a strange comfort in her presence, running to wave whenever she passed. Yet amidst this admiration, shadows lingered. Envy, subtle but persistent, had begun to grow in the hearts of some villagers. They whispered behind closed doors, muttering that Ayana's influence had become too great, that her closeness with the elders threatened the balance of tradition. There was one in particular, a woman named Kiora, whose jealousy burned hotter than the festival fires themselves. Kiora was elegant and clever, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and she had long harbored resentment toward Ayana. She saw in Ayana's courage a reflection of what the villagers wished she possessed, and in Ayana's kindness, a reminder of her own coldness and ambition. As the Festival of Flames approached, the tension grew like a storm cloud over Ashwood. Kiora watched Ayana move among the villagers, smiling, offering gentle guidance, and sharing stories of past festivals. Each laugh Ayana elicited, each hand she comforted, was a spark that ignited Kiora's envy into a slow, smoldering fire. The elders too felt the pull of Ayana's presence. They consulted with her on ritual preparations, on the crafting of the ceremonial torches, on the proper placement of offerings for the fire. Their eyes often lingered on her, their voices carrying subtle admiration that Kiora noticed and resented. Even as Ayana worked tirelessly to prepare the village, a quiet, unseen gaze followed her from the shadowed edges of the forest. Animals shied away, leaves trembled in still air, and the wind seemed to carry whispers of caution that no one else could hear. It was as though some unseen force had marked her for attention, watching her every movement, measuring her strength and her spirit. Ayana, ever vigilant, felt a subtle shiver each time she passed the darker edges of the village, a sensation she could not fully place. Her mother had often warned her that such light, as pure and steadfast as hers, would always attract darkness. Despite these omens, Ayana remained focused on the festival. She moved through Ashwood like a river of warmth and life, connecting every villager to the rhythm of the approaching celebration. Children followed her steps, mimicking her dance moves as she helped string lanterns and set torches along the riverbank. The elders smiled with quiet approval, noting that Ayana's spirit seemed to imbue the very festival with an energy that would carry through the night, even if the wind tried to extinguish it. But in the undercurrent of the village, Kiora's presence grew stronger, her plans forming quietly like smoke before a firestorm. She would wait, patient and cunning, until the moment arrived when Ayana's light could be tested, when envy could take the place of celebration, and when darkness could challenge the very heart of Ashwood. The villagers were unaware, caught in the brilliance of Ayana's courage and the excitement of the Festival of Flames, yet destiny, like a hidden ember, waited silently to ignite. In the village of Ashwood, life flowed like the twin rivers that nourished it, full of warmth, laughter, and light. But beneath that surface, tensions simmered, envy lingered, and a shadow of danger watched and waited for the moment to strike. The stage was set, the fire prepared, and Ayana, radiant and courageous, stood at the center of it all, unaware that the events about to unfold would test not only her strength but the very essence of her spirit. The envy that simmered in Kiora's heart had grown into a burning fire of obsession. Every time she saw Ayana laugh with the children, every time the elders sought her counsel, Kiora felt the sting of insignificance. She had been born into the village, educated in its ways, and yet she remained on the periphery of respect and admiration, overshadowed by a young woman whose courage and kindness seemed effortless. Her pride would not allow her to remain second. Her ambition demanded recognition, and her jealousy demanded retribution. Kiora's home, a modest house near the edge of the village, was filled with symbols of her obsession and meticulous planning. Shelves lined with scrolls detailing the rituals of ashwood, herbs and oils with strange properties, and small charms whispered to hold power over fire. She studied every corner of the festival preparations, noting Ayana's habits, her movements, and her interactions. Kiora's sharp eyes missed nothing, observing the way villagers unconsciously leaned toward Ayana's presence, drawn like moths to her warmth. As the festival of flames drew near, Kiora's plan crystallized. She knew the fire that would be lit in the central square was not merely a symbol of celebration but a sacred conduit, a ritual that connected the villagers to the life force of the land itself. If she could corrupt that fire even slightly, she could target Ayana directly, weakening her, scaring her, or perhaps even causing her harm without revealing her own hand. She spent nights preparing a special oil, infused with forbidden elements she had secretly learned from wandering traders in the distant deserts. The oil was dark as night, with a viscosity that shimmered like liquid shadow. When added to the ceremonial fire, it would burn hotter than any flame, unpredictable and dangerous, a fire that could wound flesh and spirit alike. Kiora's heart pounded as she approached the festival grounds on the morning of the ceremony. The village was alive with excitement. Lanterns were strung from every tree, and the rhythmic beating of drums echoed through the air, blending with laughter and the calls of villagers preparing offerings. She moved with the stealth of someone accustomed to secrecy, carrying her small vial of cursed oil hidden in the folds of her robe. The ritual fire pit, central to the celebration, had been built over generations, its stones etched with protective runes that Ayana and the elders had carefully maintained. Kiora knew the risk, but she believed her preparation sufficient to overcome the old protections. The moment arrived when the villagers gathered around the fire. Children held torches, mothers and fathers stood with offerings of fruit, grain and flowers. The elders began chanting, their voices rising in harmonious cadence, invoking the blessing of life and renewal. Ayana, as always, was at the heart of the ceremony, guiding the younger participants with gentle instruction, ensuring each step of the ritual was performed correctly. She smiled, radiant, oblivious to the trap lurking just beyond her sight. Kiora crept closer, timing her movements with precision. She poured the cursed oil onto the fire, each drop hissing as it touched the flames, unnoticed amid the roar of celebration. The oil's shadowy tendrils curled around the flames, feeding into the fire as if it had been waiting for her touch. In that moment, Kiora's lips curved into a satisfied smile, certain that her jealousy would soon be quenched, that Ayana's light would be dimmed or extinguished entirely. Unaware of the danger, Ayana stepped forward to perform her part of the ritual, moving gracefully with the ceremonial offerings. Her hands hovered over the flames, guiding the placement of herbs and incense, her face illuminated by the fire's golden glow. She was confident, trusting in the sacred nature of the ceremony, believing the rituals were protected by generations of tradition and blessing. The villagers watched in awe, their eyes reflecting the flickering light, completely ignorant of the shadow Kiora had introduced. As Ayana lowered the final offering into the fire, the cursed oil began to react. Flames twisted and surged, hotter and more violent than usual. The wind carried sparks in erratic directions, and the fire roared like a living thing, reaching toward Ayana with sudden intensity. She froze for a heartbeat, sensing the unnatural heat, but the ceremonial energy combined with her own connection to the village seemed to shield her from immediate harm. Still, the fire hissed and crackled in ways it had never done before, and Kiora, watching from the shadows, felt a thrill of anticipation and triumph. The villagers gasped, stepping back in alarm, but none dared intervene. The sacred fire was untouchable, a boundary no one crossed lightly. Ayana, focused and composed, continued her ritual movements, oblivious to the peril, her courage shining through the flickering blaze. Kiora's plan had been set into motion, but as the flames danced and roared, an unspoken tension hung in the air, as if the fire itself sensed the malicious intent introduced into its heart. Kiora retreated slightly, confident yet wary. She had done all she could, now the fire would take care of the rest. Ayana, performing the ritual with unwavering devotion, stepped closer to the center of the flames, her presence radiant and steady, completely unaware that the danger her rival had conjured now curled hungrily around her. The stage was set for a moment that would decide the fate of Ashwood, a single spark away from disaster or revelation. The Festival of Flames had reached its pinnacle, and the village of Ashwood thrummed with energy that pulsed like a living heartbeat. Torches lined every pathway, their flames flickering in golden rhythm with the pounding of drums that echoed from the central square to the edges of the surrounding forests. The scent of burning incense and roasted harvests mingled in the warm evening air, wrapping the villagers in a sensory tapestry of celebration and sacred ritual. Children darted between the dancers, their tiny feet kicking up dust that glittered like gold in the torchlight, while elders chanted blessings that wove through the rhythm of the drums, each syllable carrying centuries of tradition. Ayana moved gracefully through the throng, her copper hair catching every spark, her eyes reflecting both the flames and the awe of the villagers. She held a bowl of sacred offerings in her hands, filled with petals, herbs, and grains, each symbolizing life, growth, and prosperity. The villagers watched her with rapt attention, their hearts buoyed by her presence, their voices raised in song to honor the fire and the spirits of their ancestors. Her movements were fluid, a dance of devotion and reverence, blending seamlessly with the dancers who twirled around the ceremonial fire, their steps in perfect harmony with the drumbeats. But beneath the celebration, a silent threat slithered through the heart of the festival. Kiora, hidden behind a row of flickering torches, observed with a cruel, triumphant smile. The cursed oil she had poured earlier had already begun to alter the fire, its flames twisting unnaturally darker and more jagged than any ordinary blaze. The wind carried an odd warmth that made the hairs on villagers' arms stand on end, and the usual crackle of burning wood had taken on a sharper, almost whispering hiss, as if the fire were alive and hungry. As Ayana approached the center of the ceremonial fire, the flames leapt higher as though drawn to her very presence. She lowered the offerings carefully, speaking the sacred words taught to her by the elders, her voice steady and melodic, carrying over the roaring drums. For a moment, it seemed as though the fire accepted her touch, bending around her hands in a delicate dance, illuminating her face with an otherworldly glow. But then the cursed oil reacted. Flames surged violently, licking upward with a heat that felt unnatural and wrong. Sparks flew higher than they should have, igniting small plumes of smoke that twisted into shapes no villager could recognize. The villagers gasped, a wave of fear rippling through the crowd. Some screamed, stepping back as the fire hissed and roared, a sound almost like the whispering of voices in the night. Others froze, unsure whether to intervene or to honor the sanctity of the sacred flame. Ayana, ever composed, continued her ritual, her hands steady as the fire crackled around her, though a flicker of unease danced across her features. The air shimmered with heat, distorting the torches and the figures around her, creating the illusion that the festival itself was bending and swaying in unnatural waves. Kiora's smile widened, her heartbeat quickening with the thrill of anticipated triumph. She believed the cursed oil had done its work, that Ayana's courage would falter under the searing heat, that the village would witness her downfall in horror. Every flame seemed to feed her satisfaction, and she watched as villagers whispered and pointed, their faces pale, certain that the young woman who had captured their hearts was about to be consumed by the inferno. Then the flames leapt with sudden intensity, encircling Ayana entirely. The golden light of the torches paled against the unnaturally bright blaze, casting eerie shadows that writhed along the ground like serpents. Ayana's voice rose in song, trying to maintain the ritual's cadence, but even she could feel the fire pressing closer, its unnatural heat probing at the edges of her skin. Villagers screamed, some shielding their eyes, others attempting to pull back the nearest offerings in a desperate attempt to save her. The sight was terrifying. The fire did not burn the air but seemed to pulse with a consciousness of its own, bending toward her as if recognizing the energy she carried within her. Kiora, hidden in the shadows, allowed herself a triumphant laugh, certain that the inferno would finish what she had started. She imagined the villagers' despair, the cries of horror, and the final moment when Ayana would falter, overcome by the cursed flames. The fire hissed around Ayana, unnatural and magical, bending reality with its intensity, yet her figure remained poised, her movements unwavering despite the searing heat. The villagers gasped again, now certain that Ayana had been consumed. Smoke rose in thick columns, curling and twisting, shrouding her in a veil that seemed impenetrable. Mothers clutched their children, Men shook their heads in disbelief, and the elders whispered prayers to the spirits, calling for protection and mercy. The festival that had begun in joy now teetered on the edge of disaster, the air thick with fear, awe, and the raw, magical energy of a fire that refused to be ordinary. Kiora's eyes sparkled with victory, convinced her rival's fate was sealed, never realizing that the flames they thought would destroy Ayana were only beginning the transformation of a spirit that would soon rise stronger than ever, forged in fire and ready to return. The aftermath of the fire left Ashwood in a strange, heavy silence. Smoke curled lazily into the twilight sky, carrying the scent of scorched wood and burned offerings, while the villagers gathered in stunned clusters around the now diminished ceremonial fire. Mothers clutched children to their chests, elders pressed trembling hands together in prayer, and the young ones stared wide-eyed at the empty center of the blaze. Ayana's figure had vanished into the smoke, and all that remained was the lingering heat and the echo of her song, as if the fire itself had swallowed her whole. Whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. She is gone. She couldn't have survived. The very heart of Ashwood seemed to hold its breath, mourning the loss of the young woman who had carried its light so effortlessly. Meanwhile, Kiora allowed herself a triumphant smile, hidden beneath the shadows of a torchlit canopy. She glided among the villagers, offering words of false consolation and praise to the elders, basking in the admiration that came with what she believed was her cunning victory. Every glance toward the fire-filled clearing reinforced her sense of triumph. Ayana had vanished, and with her gone, Kiora imagined the village would slowly bend to her influence. She felt invincible, her envy tempered into a sharp sense of power, a satisfaction that only came from defeating one who shone brighter than oneself. Yet beyond the edges of Ashwood, past the trembling trees and whispering grasses, a different story was unfolding. From within the still smoldering embers, Ayana emerged, unharmed and whole but transformed. Her hair glowed faintly like molten copper, flickering and curling as if tiny embers danced upon each strand. Her eyes burned with an inner light, a fire that had settled deep within her, igniting her spirit with a brilliance she had never known before. Her skin bore no scar, no trace of the flame's fury, but those who looked closely would have seen a subtle shimmer, a warmth radiating from her being that marked her as different, forged anew by the inferno she had walked through. She stepped lightly from the charred clearing, each movement deliberate and filled with newfound purpose. The fire had not destroyed her, it had awakened her. Every sensation was heightened, the scent of smoke still clinging to the air, the whisper of wind through the trees, even the heartbeat of the earth beneath her feet resonated within her. She felt power coursing through her veins, not the reckless strength of anger, but a calm, resilient energy that could bend circumstance without destroying the balance of life. She understood, without thinking, that the flames had tested her courage, purified her resolve, and gifted her insight into forces that existed beyond mortal comprehension. As she retreated into the forest, the villagers' sorrow followed her like a shadow, for none could see the miracle unfolding. They mourned, believing the fire had claimed their beloved Ayana, even as their hearts whispered a tiny, unacknowledged hope that somehow she might survive. The forest welcomed her with a hush, branches bending gently as if to acknowledge her passage. Streams of silver moonlight broke through the canopy, illuminating the path ahead, guiding her deeper into the wilderness where the powers she now carried could be understood and mastered. In the solitude of the forest, Ayana explored her transformation. Her touch could stir the air, coax the wind to shift with gentle intent. Her gaze could pierce darkness, sensing the truth and falsehood of beings she encountered. Her emotions resonated outward, carrying warmth or warning to those near her. Every aspect of her being felt amplified, as though the fire had burned away fear and hesitation, leaving only clarity and purpose. She realized that Kiora's scheme, meant to destroy her, had instead forged a spirit stronger than any envy could subdue. The knowledge filled her with a quiet determination. She could feel the pulse of Ashwood from afar, the faint vibrations of mourning, celebration, and fear intertwining. She knew the village awaited her return, though they did not yet understand what form that return would take. And she knew Kiora, the architect of the curse that had sought to end her light, was unaware that the flames had not only spared Ayana but had imbued her with the strength to confront any darkness. With each step through the forest, Ayana embraced her new self. Her hair glowed brighter with every movement, her eyes reflecting the wisdom and fire within. The shadows of trees seemed to bend in acknowledgement, the wind whispering through leaves in harmony with her heartbeat. She had survived not by chance, but because the fire had deemed her worthy. Its flames had tested her courage, purified her soul, and forged her spirit into something that could neither be harmed nor forgotten. And so, hidden beneath the veil of night and forest, Ayana prepared. The village believed she was gone, Kiora believed her plan had succeeded, yet Ayana's return was inevitable. The fire had transformed her, not into the frightened girl they had known, but into a force of resilience, insight, and mystical power, a spirit forged to reclaim what had been threatened and to confront the darkness that had sought to claim her. Ayana spent the first days in the forest discovering the depth of the power that now coursed through her. Every step she took seemed to stir the very air around her. The leaves shivered in anticipation, and the streams glimmered with reflections that danced to her movements. The flames that had once threatened her now lived within her, a gentle, burning warmth that could surge and recede at her will. At first, she experimented cautiously, coaxing tiny sparks from stones and twigs, feeling the heat ripple through her hands, then concentrating on shadows that clung to the forest floor, learning to stretch and twist them like ribbons of darkness. Each effort required focus, patience, and precision, for she understood instinctively that power without control could be as dangerous as the cursed flames Kiora had unleashed. As the days passed, Ayana's command over these elemental forces deepened. She could call the wind to carry her whispers or still it to a perfect hush. The earth beneath her feet seemed to pulse with life in response to her will, sending vibrations that alerted her to every creature nearby, every movement, every hidden presence. More astonishingly, she discovered that the flames within her eyes and hair resonated with the emotions of those far away. Fear, envy, and deceit became tangible vibrations, as though the fire itself was alerting her to the presence of malice. She realized with a mixture of awe and dread that she could sense Kiora's schemes, the plotting and envy that flowed like poison through the air of Ashwood, even from miles away. In the quiet moments, Ayana reflected on the fire's lesson. This power was not a gift to be flaunted carelessly, nor a weapon to strike impulsively. The flames had tested her courage, her resilience, and her spirit's capacity to endure. Every spark of pain, every sensation of heat, every brush with the unnatural energy of the cursed oil had forged her into someone who could confront darkness without yielding. She understood that her true strength lay not only in the ability to wield fire or manipulate shadows but in the clarity of purpose that the trial had instilled within her. She began to practice meditation alongside her elemental exercises, centering herself and focusing her mind on the balance between light and shadow. She envisioned the cursed flames of the festival, the malicious energy that Kiora had introduced, and felt them dissipate in her hands as she extended her will. Her breath became a rhythm that matched the pulse of the forest, the heartbeat of the earth, and the lingering warmth of the fire within her. Each day the power became less an external force and more an extension of her own being, a natural part of who she had become. Through these practices, Ayana also discovered her heightened intuition. She could sense deceit before it surfaced in words, envy before it turned to action, and malice before it could find a vessel. She felt Kiora's presence from afar, subtle and dangerous, a coil of ambition and jealousy that sought to constrict the village she loved. But Ayana no longer feared her rival. Instead she watched, patient and deliberate, understanding that every scheme could be anticipated, every betrayal countered, and every danger faced with wisdom rather than haste. The forest became both a sanctuary and a training ground. Ayana drew energy from the flames that lived within her and learned to bend the shadows that crept naturally along the moss-covered ground to her will. She could manipulate the intensity of heat to warm herself or create protective barriers, and shadows could shield her presence or reveal the intentions of those who dared to approach. Each skill was honed with care, the fire within her teaching discipline as much as it taught strength. She also understood the importance of restraint. Though she longed to return to Ashwood immediately, to reveal herself and confront Kiora for the harm she had tried to inflict, Ayana recognized that the fire had not only granted her power but also demanded patience. The reckoning must be precise, it must be just. Acting impulsively would waste the lesson the flames had imparted and could endanger the very villagers she had survived to protect. She resolved to wait, to observe, and to prepare, ensuring that when she returned, she would do so with clarity, control, and the full force of the spirit forged within the fire. Days turned to weeks as Ayana's connection to the elemental forces strengthened. Every sunrise and sunset became a lesson in balance, every gust of wind a test of her control, every flicker of light or shadow an opportunity to refine her power. And all the while, her awareness of Kiora's lingering envy and the subtle threats that still loomed over Ashwood sharpened her mind. She was readying herself for a return that would be more than a confrontation. It would be a demonstration of the fire's judgment, a reckoning not fueled by rage, but by the spirit that had been forged stronger, wiser, and more luminous than ever before. The next festival of flames arrived, brighter and more vibrant than any Ashwood had seen in years. Lanterns hung from every tree, reflecting like molten gold in the river, and the drums that heralded the celebrations reverberated through the village, carrying with them the collective heartbeat of generations. Smoke spiraled upward from ceremonial fires, carrying the scent of incense, roasted harvests, and wild herbs, blending with the sweet perfume of blooming flowers that had survived the seasons. The villagers moved with energy and joy, children weaving between dancers, elders performing blessings, and the young women and men swirling in elaborate patterns that had been taught and perfected over decades. The festival was a symphony of color, sound, and movement, alive with tradition, but it was also alive with expectation, for deep down, many still whispered of Ayana and the fire that had claimed her months before. No one noticed the stranger who arrived at the edge of the village that evening. Cloaked in a long, flowing robe that shimmered faintly like the embers of a dying fire, the figure moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate, as though the earth itself recognized the power she carried. The villagers, caught up in their celebration, only felt a subtle pull toward her, a magnetic aura that made heads turn and hearts pause. Children stopped mid-step, their eyes wide with curiosity, elders inclined their heads respectfully, and even the dancers faltered for a heartbeat, sensing something ancient and potent in the presence of this mysterious woman. Kiora, positioned near the ceremonial fire to maintain her influence and observe the villagers, noticed immediately. At first, she dismissed the unease curling in her stomach as mere superstition, but the sensation intensified with every passing second. The stranger's eyes, though hidden beneath a hood, radiated a quiet authority that seemed to draw power from the very fire and shadows surrounding her. Kiora's palms grew clammy, and a shiver of fear slithered down her spine. She had believed herself secure in the hierarchy she had constructed after Ayana's supposed demise. The villagers adored her, praised her for leading the rituals, and leaned upon her advice. But now, a force she could not name had entered Ashwood, and it threatened to unravel all she had built. The stranger moved toward the ceremonial fire, not with the clumsy steps of a visitor, but with the intimate familiarity of someone who understood its rhythm, its energy, and its hidden currents. Sparks seemed to leap from her feet, brushing the ground in tiny flickers, and the air shifted subtly, carrying with it the scent of smoke and heat without any visible flame. Villagers murmured in awe, uncertain whether the display was part of the festival or the arrival of something far greater. Whispers spread. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why does the air around her hum with life? Ayana, though disguised, could feel every heartbeat of the village as if it were her own. The fire within her responded to the ancient energy of Ashwood, rekindling her connection to the land she had nearly lost. She allowed herself to observe Kiora from a distance, noting the queen's restless movements and subtle gestures of unease. The tension was palpable. Kiora's eyes flickered toward the stranger repeatedly, each glance revealing a growing awareness of a power she could not control, a presence that threatened her dominance. Ayana's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile, for she recognized the fear she had seen mirrored in the flames that had forged her. The villagers' reactions continued to shift. Some approached cautiously, drawn to the stranger's quiet authority, while others whispered to one another, feeling the aura of something supernatural. Children giggled nervously, elders whispered prayers for protection and blessing, and even the wind seemed to bend toward her, carrying her scent through the festival like a herald. Every movement Ayana made was a silent declaration. She had survived, she had transformed, and she was no longer the vulnerable girl who had once walked among them. Kiora's unease grew sharper with every passing moment. She tried to reassert control over the festival, clapping loudly, calling for villagers to focus on her, and offering false praise for their participation in the ceremonies. Yet every gesture seemed diminished in comparison to the stranger's presence. Even the ceremonial fire, which had long been her symbol of authority and the heart of her perceived power, seemed to respond to the stranger, flickering with renewed intensity and warmth that no one could explain. Shadows elongated and curled toward her subtly, as if recognizing a master who commanded both light and darkness. The stranger paused at the edge of the fire circle, and the villagers instinctively gave way, forming a loose circle around her without knowing why. Her head lifted, revealing a glimpse of hair that shimmered like glowing embers, and eyes that radiated an inner fire, piercing and brilliant. A hush fell over the crowd, the drums seemed to quiet, and even the smoke from the fire appeared to twist toward her in homage. Those who had not seen Ayana before felt a reverent awe, while those who had known her whispered silently, hearts quickening with the sense that something extraordinary had returned. In that moment, Kiora understood instinctively that this was no ordinary stranger. Her plan had failed, her supposed victory was a lie. The fire that had once been her instrument of destruction had instead forged the very spirit she had tried to destroy. Ayana, reborn and transformed, stood among the villagers, not as the victim of a scheme but as a force of resilience, power and purpose. Kiora's composure faltered, her mind racing to anticipate the stranger's next move, but she found herself unable to act, paralyzed by the certainty that a reckoning was coming, one that she could neither prevent nor control. The villagers, unaware of the identity of the stranger, felt drawn to her warmth, courage and authority, while Kiora struggled to maintain the illusion of dominance she had fought so hard to secure. The tension in the air was electric, as if the festival itself had become a stage for destiny. Ayana, cloaked in mystery yet unmistakably herself, allowed the crowd to sense her power without revealing it entirely. She had returned, not with vengeance yet, but with the knowledge, strength and fire that would ensure Kiora's schemes could no longer thrive. Ayana moved through the village with a quiet purpose, her presence cloaked in subtlety and grace. She did not reveal herself outright, allowing the villagers to remain unaware of her identity, yet every action she took was deliberate, designed to test, expose and unmask the corruption that had taken root under Kiora's rule. The flames that danced within her eyes and the embers that shimmered faintly along her hair were barely perceptible to the casual observer, but to those attuned to the village's subtle currents, they carried a resonance that seemed protective, even divine. Wherever she walked, shadows bent gently, winds shifted softly, and fires flickered with unusual patterns, as though signaling a presence both vigilant and just. Kiora, confident in her dominance, moved through the festival with practiced charm, offering guidance to the villagers, blessing the ceremonial fires and speaking with a sweetness that masked the venom beneath. Yet Ayana's presence, though unseen, subtly began to undermine her carefully crafted facade. A torch that Kiora passed flickered wildly, startling her and drawing murmurs from onlookers. Small disputes arose among her favored followers, arguments over minor missteps that previously would have been smoothed over with her intervention. Each incident was orchestrated by Ayana's influence, her power guiding events to reveal cracks in Kiora's control without anyone suspecting the truth. In the marketplace, Kiora's favored traders suddenly found their wares misaligned, subtle signs that undermined their authority and sowed confusion. Goods spilled, ledgers were misplaced, and whispered rumors of minor thefts began to circulate, each one carefully magnified by Ayana's manipulation of attention and perception. The villagers, initially puzzled, could not ignore the pattern. Small, seemingly coincidental failures seemed to follow Kiora wherever she moved. They began to notice her eyes darting nervously at unexpected moments, her hands trembling slightly when attempting to correct minor errors. While they could not name the cause, an uneasy awareness began to ripple through the crowd, the sense that a watchful, protective force was present, one that Kiora could neither see nor understand. Ayana's manipulation extended beyond mere chance. In a ceremonial dance, a favored acolyte stumbled as he followed Kiora's commands, an incident seemingly minor but amplified by subtle flames that flickered near his path, causing a reflection that revealed the queen's whispered words of intimidation. Villagers caught sight of the acolyte's discomfort, reading the tension in his body as evidence of hidden cruelty. Whispers spread, soft at first, "She demands too much, too harsh." The murmurs grew louder, carried by wind and perception, a tide of doubt beginning to lap at Kiora's previously unshakable authority. Meanwhile, Ayana tested her own courage in the process. Though she remained hidden, every action required precision and restraint. One misstep could reveal her identity prematurely or allow Kiora to regain her composure. The fire within her pulsed with impatience, the energy of the ordeal threatening to surge outward in visible, uncontrollable waves. Yet Ayana remembered the lessons of the forest, the discipline instilled by the flames that had forged her. She held herself in balance, letting the events unfold like threads in a tapestry, each movement carefully calculated, each influence subtle but undeniable. The villagers, sensing the protective presence without knowing its source, began to whisper about the air itself seeming different. Fires burned brighter in unexpected corners, shadows shifted to reveal hidden truths, and small acts of misfortune for Kiora's followers became increasingly noticeable. A once loyal servant, previously too fearful to speak, suddenly revealed a minor deception, emboldened by the unseen power guiding them. Each revelation chipped away at Kiora's image of control, eroding the veneer of perfection she had built over months. As the day progressed, tension built to a palpable hum. Kiora's confidence wavered, her laughter forced and brittle, her eyes darting nervously toward corners where Ayana subtly influenced events. She could not explain why her control was slipping, why minor errors multiplied, why the villagers were beginning to question her benevolence. Every step she took seemed to meet resistance, invisible yet undeniable, as though the fire itself had returned to judge her. By evening, the festival square had become a stage of exposure. Small incidents, misplaced items, whispered confessions, unintentional betrayals, layered upon one another, creating a crescendo of doubt and awareness among the villagers. They began to sense that someone, something protective and powerful, was watching over them. They did not know who it was, nor did they understand the full nature of the force guiding events, yet a collective sense of hope and courage stirred in their hearts. Kiora, increasingly unmoored and aware that her hold was slipping, moved with a frantic energy trying to restore order, yet the unseen hand of justice, born from the flames that had forged Ayana, guided the village toward clarity and truth. The test of courage had begun, not just for Ayana but for the villagers as well. They would come to see the cracks in Kiora's dominance, witness the subtle unveiling of envy and cruelty, and feel the presence of a force that promised protection and balance, even if they did not yet realize it was their beloved Ayana reborn from the fire. The festival's climax approached as the ceremonial fire was rekindled for the final ritual, a blaze meant to honor the village's ancestors and reinforce the bonds of community. Torches were placed in precise patterns, incense spiraled into the sky, and drums beat a rhythm that echoed through every corner of Ashwood. The villagers gathered in anticipation, their eyes reflecting the glow of the flames, unaware that the night's events would reveal more than tradition. It would expose truth, malice, and courage. Kiora moved to the center of the square, her confidence restored after days of subtle manipulation, believing she could assert control and reinforce her dominance over both the villagers and the festival itself. As Kiora began her speech, extolling her supposed virtues and the protection she offered to the village, the air shifted subtly. The torches flickered, not in response to the wind but to something unseen, a presence growing stronger with every passing heartbeat. From the edges of the crowd, a ripple of light and heat shimmered, drawing the villagers' attention. They noticed it first as a strange glow at the periphery, like embers dancing on the edge of vision. Then the glow coalesced into a form, familiar yet transformed, standing tall and radiant, hair shimmering like molten fire, eyes burning with an inner light that seemed to illuminate the very soul. Ayana had returned, fully revealed, and the ceremonial fire bent in her presence as though acknowledging its true heir. The villagers gasped, a mix of awe and disbelief freezing them in place. Children clutched their parents' hands, elders whispered prayers of recognition, and the young ones stared wide-eyed at the reborn figure who commanded the flames with effortless grace. Ayana's presence radiated authority and protection, a force both gentle and formidable. Every ember seemed to leap toward her, circling her in a dance of recognition and allegiance. The ceremonial fire itself responded, flames rising higher, hotter, yet controlled, bowing subtly as though to honor the spirit that had been forged within it. Kiora's confident smile faltered as the unseen energy grew tangible, radiating a heat and intensity she could neither command nor resist. She attempted to speak, to assert her control once more, but her voice trembled under the weight of the undeniable presence before her. The villagers began to murmur, sensing that Kiora's authority was waning, that the force she had tried to manipulate and control had returned stronger than ever. Whispers spread through the crowd, "Who is she? What is this power?" Even her loyal followers, who had celebrated her cunning for months, began to step back, instinctively understanding that the balance had shifted. Ayana moved forward, each step deliberate, leaving trails of warmth and light that seemed to cleanse the air. Her gaze fell upon Kiora, and in that moment the queen's malice was exposed to all. The villagers saw the envy in her eyes, the hidden cruelty behind her smiles, and the calculated acts of harm she had orchestrated to eliminate Ayana. The truth was no longer subtle, it shone brighter than any torch, undeniable and visible to all who looked upon her. Kiora's schemes, once masked by charm and fear, unraveled as the villagers witnessed the contrast between the fire-forged spirit of Ayana and the brittle, corrupt authority Kiora had attempted to maintain. Ayana extended her hand, and the shadows around Kiora writhed like serpents, responding to the force of justice that emanated from her. The flames responded in kind, curling around the ceremonial circle to protect the innocent while highlighting the deceit of the guilty. Sparks danced in patterns that revealed hidden lies, guided whispers that exposed secret malice, and flames that separated those with pure intentions from those tainted by envy. Every movement Ayana made demonstrated the harmony of power, the balance of fire and spirit, and the strength of a heart forged in trial. Kiora, desperate, tried to regain control, summoning the villagers' attention with loud proclamations and threats. Yet every attempt faltered. The fire, loyal to Ayana, seemed to repel her influence, responding instead to the purity and courage of the spirit before it. Shadows twisted around Kiora, reflecting her deceit in the flames, amplifying her guilt for all to see. The villagers, who had once feared the stranger and whispered among themselves about her power, now understood the truth. They could see the strength of Ayana, the protective force that had watched over them all this time, and the fragility of the queen who had ruled through envy and manipulation. Finally, Ayana raised her arms, allowing the fire to flare in a controlled explosion of light and warmth that bathed the entire village square. The intensity of the blaze revealed Kiora's actions fully, leaving no doubt about her intentions or her cruelty. Yet the flames never harmed the innocent. They shielded and nurtured those pure of heart, highlighting the stark contrast between justice and malice. Kiora fell to her knees, her power undone, her schemes revealed, and the villagers' eyes were open to the balance that Ayana had restored. In that moment, the fire bore witness to courage, resilience, and the spirit forged stronger than any malice, a force ready to reclaim harmony for Ashwood.